like I said, you have a few problems that just say list the class width, list the class midpoints, and list the class boundaries. And then you have a problem where you actually make a frequency distribution. You'll always be given the lower class limit, what to start with, and the class width. This table has to do with the amount of tar and nicotine and carbon dioxide in cigarettes. Like Tony said, made her want to quit smoking just looking at these numbers. We have, let's see, 25 brands of cigarettes, and the amount of tar, and these are filtered non-menthol cigarettes. We have the amount of tar, the amount of nicotine, and the amount of CO. I think that's supposed to be CO2, and the 2 got cut off. That's carbon dioxide. Construct a frequency distribution, begin with the lower class limit of 0.2 milligrams, and use a class width of 0.2 milligrams. Well, we're told that the lower limit of the first class is 0.2. And if the class width is also 0.2, what is the next lower limit going to be? 0.4. You're just adding 0.2 to the lower limit above. And what is the next lower limit going to be? 0.6, and then 0.8 and 1.0 and 1.2. Now for the upper limits, notice, let's see, what is it we're going to make? We're going to make our frequency just using this nicotine column. Well, let's think about it a second. All of these amounts of nicotine are listed to the nearest 10th. None of them are listed to the nearest 100th. So nothing is going to fall between 0.3 and 0.4. I don't have to worry about getting a 0.35. There is no 0.35 here. So 0.3 is sufficient for that upper limit. And then the next upper limit would be what? Hang on to that question just a second. I'll come back to it. 0.5, and then 0.7, 0.9, 1.1, and 1.3. I would do this in pencil because it is possible that you will have to erase. But I got that first upper limit by looking at this data and noticing that all of them were to the 10th place. So I don't need to have to the 100th or to the 1000th or to the 10,000th for my limits. Either it's going to be 0.3 or 0.4. There's nothing, there are not any of these values that are going to be 0.35. All right. Now, if you ask me for the class boundary, it would be halfway between 0.3 and 0.4. So 0.35 would be a boundary, but none of these values are sitting on the boundary. None of them are sitting on the fence post. All right. Now we just need some tally marks. I'm going to start this process to make sure that you understand what I'm tallying, but then I'll just tell you what I got for the other classes. Cigarette brands with amounts of nicotine between 0.2 and 0.3. Actually, that's not the easiest way to do it. The easiest way to do it is go down the list. 0.4 for Barclay cigarettes would fall in that second class. 1.0 falls in the 5th class. 1.2 falls in the 6th class. 0.8 is in the 4th. And then just go on down to the bottom of the list and make sure you have 25 tally marks. All right. To not spend class time doing that, let me just tell you there was only one cigarette that had between 0.2 and 0.3 milligrams of nicotine. Only one that had between 0.4 and 0.5. Only one had between 0.6 and 0.7. 8 fell in that fourth class. 12 fell in the fifth. And only 2 fell in the highest class. Now, it was hard to make any conclusions about this data looking at all these numbers. They were just overwhelming. But with the frequency distribution, I can say, well, most of these 25 cigarettes, almost half of the brands had between 1.0 and 1.1 milligrams of nicotine. And I could say almost all of them had at least 0.8 milligrams of nicotine. Only 3 out of the 25 had less than 0.8 milligrams of nicotine. Again, if I ask you for the class boundaries, it would be halfway between 0.3 and 0.4. Right here would be 0.35, 0.55, 0.75. But don't forget to go back a class boundary too. Let me just list those. Actually, I have on here. Where is it? Right there. The first class boundary is 0.35. The class width is 0.2. So just keep counting up by 0.2. And you can go back by 0.2 to get your left fence post. 0.35 minus 0.2 is that 0.15. All right. Any questions about that frequency distribution or the terms class width, class boundaries, class midpoint? Yes, ma'am. The 0.3, I could have used, okay, I already had this lower limit filled in for all the classes. I could have gone all the way up. I want to get really close to 0.4, as close as I need to. I could have gone up to 0.39 or 0.399 or 0.3999, but I didn't need to because all of these were to the nearest 10th. So I didn't need to go up to 0.399. I just needed the next 10th before 0.4 and the next 10th before 0.6. That was a better way of describing it, the 10th before, because all my data values were to the nearest 10th. I didn't need to go to the 100th or 1000th. All right. We talked about frequency tables. Let's talk about, if I can, all of a sudden, I'm thinking, there we go, how to make that go away. Let's talk about a histogram. A histogram is just a picture of your frequency distribution. Some folks like to look at numbers, some folks like to look at pictures. This is just a picture of that. Notice along the horizontal axis, we would have a couple of things you can use. You could use the lower class limits, but it kind of makes sense to use your class boundaries. Again, your class boundaries are the fence posts, and you don't want anybody straddling a fence post. If I used the lower class boundaries, if I used 60 and 70 and 80 and 90 along my horizontal axis, then into which class would the 60s fall? Or excuse me, into what class would the 70s fall? Would they be on this side of the fence or that side of the fence? They'd actually be right on the fence. So it makes more sense to use your class boundaries for the horizontal axis. I'm not ready to show you that. Use the class boundaries for the horizontal axis. The vertical axis is just the frequency, the number of brands of cigarettes that fell in each class. Make sure you always label your axes so that anybody looking at your graph can understand what it's about. Yes. Yeah, because all the values will clearly fall into one class or the other rather than being on a fence post. Look at this slide. This gives you some guidelines, and then we'll do one. The bars on the horizontal scale are clearly labeled with either the class boundaries or the class midpoints or the lower class limits. It's really best to use the class boundaries. You'll see some histograms that have the lower class limits, but you're going to have some guys on the fence posts, or class midpoints, but class boundaries is what we'll use. The horizontal scale, use the class boundaries or the class midpoints. The vertical scales, use the class frequency. So let's do a histogram for the milligrams of tar in these 25 cigarettes, 25 brands of cigarettes. Trying to get my frequency table and my little spot I left for a histogram both on the screen at the same time. All right. On the other handout, I had written the class boundaries, and you probably copied them down. So let's just put those across the horizontal axis, starting with the left boundary. The left boundary was 0.15, and the class width was 0.2. So just count by 0.2s. Yeah, 0.35, 0.55, 0.75, 0.95, 1.15, and the right boundary was 1.35. The greatest frequency that we had in any class was 12, so that's what needs to go up the vertical axis. Now, did I actually leave you 12 little lines here? I think I did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, you can count by ones. Or you can just label every other line and count by twos if you don't want to try to squeeze all those numbers in. Did you have a question? Okay. Only one brand of cigarette had between 0.2 and 0.3 milligrams of nicotine. So the bar for that class only needs to go up to the first line. Only one brand of cigarette had between 0.4 and 0.5 milligrams of nicotine. So the bar only needs to go up to 1 for that class. And the third class also had a frequency of 1. The fourth class had a frequency of 8. Its bar is much higher. The next class had a frequency of 12. And the last class had a frequency of 2. So if you're a numbers person, you can look at the frequency distribution table. If you're a picture person, look at the histogram. Both of them confirm that most of those 25 cigarettes, and I don't know if those 25 brands are representative of the entire population of cigarettes or not. I don't know. I don't know how they were chosen. But at least of those 25, certainly the vast majority of them had, like we said up here, 0.8 or more milligrams of nicotine.